Good morning and welcome to week two. I'm excited to be here. I had fun on week one. I think I had 45 responses. Uh, it's just a lot of responses. But while we're at it and while I'm here, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. Uh, 37 of the 39 of you completed the pretest. Those questions that you saw on the pretest, you're going to see again over the next 16 weeks. The high score was a 38 out of 50. I'm extremely pleased with that. But the average score was a 24 out of 50, and which means we've got a lot of work to do over the next 16 weeks or so. Starting this week with the introduction to corrections. I am also need to talk about the discussions themselves. And I know a lot of you just posted an original discussion and left it, and you never came back. Some of you didn't even post your original post until late on Sunday. Okay, so these are the rules for the discussions. The discussions are required to have an original post. You are required to respond to at least 3 classmates, and you are expected to reply to at least 2 of those people who responded to you throughout the week. So it's important that you make your original post early in the week and then you respond to the 3 others in a time which allows them to reply to you. So as I mentioned last week, I would like to see your original post posted by Wednesday of each week. I would like your responses to be made by Friday of each week. And then you can go in on Sunday and reply to 2 people that responded to you and then take the quiz. We have a couple weeks left to decide on your topic for your research paper. And that discussion is found in week 4. So once you are ready to pick your topic, go ahead and post it in the week 4 discussion. Again, I didn't show you this last week, but this is our textbook. It is Correction in the 21st Century by Frank Smollinger and John Smikla. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. But I use these 2 guys in a lot of my freshman and sophomore level courses. They do a great job for the survey. So if you go into this book, for example, chapter 1, which we're going to be discussing here in a few minutes, starts on page 2, page 3, and then goes through. And if you go to the end of the chapter, and the end of chapter 1 is going to be found starting on page 16 through 18. And there's some research questions there. There's questions for review. There's summaries. There's key terms. There's decision-making examples, and there's endnotes. Okay, so the endnotes are things that, you could go, if you wanted to go above and beyond just reading the textbook, you could go to those items there. You can also look to these questions for review. One of these questions for review you're going to find in the discussion. But they can also give you research topics that you can look into and research at the end of every chapter. They give you these ideas for research, or you can go through and find the little blue boxes and you can do a research project on that. Or you can look at other things. What is the evidence-based correction? What role does it play? There's a couple of you that in your introductions talked about how you're really interested in data and data analysis. Chapter 2 is going to get into that data analysis a little bit. Maybe you could do a research project on that. And then you can just go on and through with your decision on what you want to write your paper on. Again, because there's 39 of you in this class, and that number is probably going to drop to 37. There's 2 of you that did not participate this first week. I've sent emails. I have to do a report by Thursday on who is enrolled in the class, who's participating in the class, and all that fun stuff. So I'll do that on Thursday. We have a really cool discussion, really good things to go over this week. This first lecture is actually 2 lectures, and I'm going to do my best to try to keep it as short as possible so that I don't bore you beyond tears. So let me start with sharing my screen. So it's not what I want. Here we go. So let me start here. This is the class. Let me back up. Okay. So if you're having problems finding or the links aren't working, if you come into our content page, which is right here, you can close this. We don't need that. So I have announcements and tasks. That's my workaday. You guys don't need to see that. So here is this, and I am supposedly sharing my content, so you can see my content. If you come in here, and this is the class, okay, so for week 2, which is where we're at, is in here, but I'll get to that in a minute. If you click into launch class, every Monday at 9 a.m., I will start this class. You can come in here and you can just, if you want to listen to it, pay attention live, you would just hit launch and it would bring you into the class. However, if you missed the live session, you come in here to recordings, okay, and in the recordings, you can start the playback. And you can see I'm already recording this one and the recording is in progress, but you can start the playback. IT has told me that they have this fixed so everybody can watch my videos now and I don't have to download and whatnot. But that's how that works. So going into week 2, we've got a couple of lectures. We've got PowerPoint lecture for the textbook. We've got a PowerPoint lecture on the history of punishment. I've included my lecture notes on both of those. And this one I really like, and we're going to talk about this one here in a second. I'm going to pull this up. And we've got a discussion. And this week's discussion is discuss why the correctional populations in the United States increased dramatically in the 30 years between 1980 and 2010. Why have they since declined? And I wanted to talk about that, and I'll probably discuss it as well in my responses to you guys. But when I was in graduate school in 2004, 2005, and then I was in the graduate school for the public administration master's degree in 2006 and 2007. I had this book, and there was this book that we had to read and comment on and understand, and it was called "Why Did the Crime Rates Drop in the 1990s?" Now we're saying that crime rates didn't drop in the 1990s, that they steadily increased from the 1980s through 2010. And now we're saying that for the last 15 years, we've had a decrease in crime. And why is that? And I'd like you to get your ideas and your thoughts and opinions on that. 30 years from now, we may be saying something different because we're looking at, and we've heard a lot about the illegal immigration. We've heard a lot about the murders. Here recently, President Trump stated that crime was so bad in Washington, D.C., that he federalized law enforcement, put the alphabet soup agencies on the streets. He deployed the National Guard. And as the reports as of this morning, there has not been a murder in Washington, D.C. in 10 days. So is that working or not? And how do we go about decreasing crime? And that's what this discussion is about. And then there's a quiz. The quiz should be already open and available to you. Let's see, it is visible to the students. In fact, all the quizzes are visible to you, so you don't have to stay week to week. If you wanted to work ahead, you could. For example, on September 8th, the week of September 8th through the 12th, I am going to be down in East Texas at a conference for the chaplaincy in for the state of Texas within the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. And this is what I'm going to be doing and working on for a period. So I am recording. I've got some people coming up from both directions. So if I'm interrupted, I'm not going to turn the recording off. I'm just going to record it. So please forgive me in advance. But I want to talk about, and I know one of you talked about systems and how you really enjoy systems and you like systems training and systems models. Well, I lost my class. Here we go. But there are three parts to the criminal justice system. Let me show this here real quick. Maybe it'll let me expand it large. And there are, well, that didn't work well, did it? Actually look better this way. There are three parts of the structure of the criminal justice department. They are the police, the courts, and corrections. And these are the aspects. Okay? And I've saw a lot of you. A lot of you want to be detectives. You want to work police work. A whole bunch of you want to become lawyers and work in the courts. And then a few of you wanted to be on probation. Not a single one of you wanted to work in institutional corrections, but neither here nor there. So these three sections have a lot to do with the funnel of policing and how this chart works. And you can look at these in your textbook. The funnel of policing, I think, starts on page 4. Well, I thought it did. Actually, it starts on page 10. Okay, so the entire system, the entire flow, everything within law enforcement, within the criminal justice system starts with police. It starts with a complaint. Now, it doesn't even start with the police. It starts with the complaint. Somebody has to pick up the phone and somebody has to make a call to the police department. Okay. So out of every 1,000 crimes, 500 of them aren't even reported. So of the 500, so you've got this great big humongous crime statistic of all of this crime, but we can only report that number of crime or the numbers of crime as they're reported to the police. Okay, so if we're estimating that there are 500 crimes that go unreported, then we've got a large dark number of crime. And how do we figure out what this is? And we do that through the two ways that we track crime. We track crime for the UCR, the Uniform Crime Report, and we track crime through the victim service victims. Hold on a second. The crime victims. The National Crime Victimization Survey. So the National Crime Victimization Survey is a survey where we go into households and we talk to people in the houses about the crimes that have occurred to them over the last 6 months. I live out here on this ranch. There's no crime out here. So you call me and I'm going to say there's no crime. Okay. My biggest crime rates, is the neighbor's bull breaking my fence, raping my heifers. But I work in a prison, okay, and I find that really weird too. The offense is because security can't be at every place all the time. They depend upon inmates to report crime for safe prisons, and we'll talk about safe prisons later in the semester. But we want to make a point. We want to make sure that all crime is reported, and it's not. less than half of crime is reported in America. So of those 500 crimes that are reported, 400 of them go unresolved. Okay, so a few years ago, I used to own a 1978 Chevy pickup truck. It was painted periwinkle purple and yellow. Everybody thought I was an LSU fan, but in reality, I was a Minnesota Vikings fan. So I had my truck painted. I wrecked my truck, and in the rebuild, I had it painted periwinkle purple with gold or yellow highlights and detailing. The headache rack was gold. Toolbox was gold. There were gold pinstripes down the side. And then there were little pictures of Vikings on the front quarter panels. Pretty cool truck. But somebody graffitied all over it. And I called and I reported it to the police because, as a good standing citizen, you report crime so that we can decrease crime. But that crime was never solved. Nobody ever solved that crime where somebody spray painted black steer all over my truck. Where I lived, the colors were black and gold, and their mascot was a steer. So of the 100 crimes where the police solved it and filed an indictment, 58 are released and the charges are dismissed. 42 are detained and kept in jail. Okay, well, back up. Pre-trial, 58 are released. They're released on bail. 42 are detained and kept until trial. Of these 100 prosecutions, there are 8 diversions or other outcomes where the district attorney or the county attorney says, well, I'm going to defer this. If you stay out of trouble for 6 months, we're just going to dismiss it and it's going to go away. Okay. 23 are dismissed right out of fact. And then of the 100, only 69 are prosecuted. So now we're looking at, we started with 1,000 crimes, and now we have 69 actually going to court. Of those 69, 65 plead. 65 plead guilty, and then they're sentenced. Okay. And then of the remaining 4 go to trial. 4 out of 1,000 inmates, 4 out of 1,000 crimes actually go to trial. Of the 4 that go to trial, 3 are acquitted. 1 is acquitted and 3 are convicted. So if we have the 65 guilty pleas and the 3 convictions, we have a total of 68 convicted felons. Of that, 56 are felonies, 11 are misdemeanors. Of the 68, 24 go to prison. The only people who go to prison are felons. So out of the 56 felons that are convicted, half of them, 24, less than half of them go to prison. 24 go to a sentence of jail of less than 2 years. 17 are placed on probation, and 3 are placed on some form of deferred adjudication. So this is the funnel. So we start, and I should probably be going to the lecture point, but let's do that. Let me get closer. I can't see. The sun's in my eyeballs. Okay, so okay, so this week we're supposed to be, the learning objectives are supposed to be that you describe corrections and the corrections explosions that began in the United States in the 80s, and tell how American prison populations have finally started to decline. You should be able to describe how crime is measured in the United States, and I've already talked about that, and list the kinds of crimes that cause people to enter the correctional programs and institutions. You want to list and describe the various components of the criminal justice system, including the major components of the corrections subsystem. Okay, so what's a carceral state? A carceral state is were the social conditions that exist when the government power is used to incapacitate, incarcerate, detain, or otherwise limit the physical freedom of individuals. So in the state with the social contract that we made a long time ago, and I'm sure you remember signing it. The social contract says, I am, and this started with Hammurabi. It started with the fact that we as a people will give up some of our rights of vengeance and give it to the state. And then the state will seek vengeance for the crimes that have been committed against you. Okay. In the United States, crime rates have decreased over the past 15 years. The number of people under correctional supervision has steadily increased, leveling off 15 years ago, and then almost 16 years ago. And then we're seeing a decrease in prison populations. Well, I had a meeting with my warden the other day, and we're talking about opening more prisons. The prison I work at, we have one building that holds 80, 160, 250 inmates, and it's been closed for a number of years, and they're talking about reopening it. The prison that's exactly right next door holds another 900 inmates, and they're talking about opening that prison as well. So even though the textbook is telling us that crime is decreasing and the populations in the prisons are decreasing, on the ground right now, that is incorrect. But we're going to follow the textbook. You can put in your comments. However, in Texas, Dr. Fisher is experiencing an increase in incarceration, not a decrease. And I think a lot of this has to do with the illegal population or the undocumented population. The undocumented immigration, because I don't want to offend anybody really. But a lot of the members of these of this class of people, this undocumented, are committing crimes. And I have a lot of people in my prison as I go through their UCR that have committed some very heinous crimes, and they have an ICE detainer, which means once they finish serving their time here, then they go deal with ICE, and then ICE deports them. And what I find interesting is these guys that are suffering from, not suffering, but they have an ICE detainer. They're not getting parole. They have to fully discharge their full sentence. They keep getting set-offs, and they have to serving their time. Okay, so when there's a crime or a violation of criminal law, the state takes over vengeance. Vengeance is mine, says Governor Abbott, Governor Huckabee. Vengeance belongs to the state, and this started with Hammurabi way back 5,000 years ago, or 5,000 BC. And what happens is when you commit a crime, you're placed under some form of correctional supervision. And correctional supervision is a term that refers to all persons that are under supervision of the adult correctional system. This includes community supervision, also known as probation, incarceration, the institutional corrections, which is inside the prison or jail, and then again, community supervision, which also, or reentry, which refers to parole. Okay. So the reasons for fueling the carceral explosion was to get tough on crime laws. Especially in the 1970s and 80s, we saw a new model, and I'll talk about this model here in a little bit. And that model is called the medical model. And the medical model suggested that everybody has the ability to be rehabilitated. And so they arrest you, they send you to jail, they want you to be rehabilitated, they give you all kinds of programs, they give you education, they do all these things to try to, they give you substance abuse treatment, they give you sexual predator treatment, sex abuse treatment, domestic violence treatment. They give all of these different programs, these treatment programs to help you, to rehabilitate you, so that when you re-enter society, everything will be better. But to get tough on crime laws also was a result of President Clinton, and when he was governor of Arkansas, and governor, oh, he was the governor of Massachusetts, ran against Dukakis, Governor Dukakis. Massachusetts and Arkansas had a furlough program where they would let inmates go free for a little while if they had good conduct. And right before the elections, and I don't remember the guy's name, but Bush was running against Dukakis, and Dukakis had let this guy go free. He was a murderer. He had been no write-ups. So they gave him a weekend furlough so that he could go home and visit his family. And while he was out of prison, he murdered 2 people. So that cost Governor Dukakis the election, and George H.W. Bush, George I, became president of the United States. So during the campaign for President Clinton, who was governor of Arkansas at the time, there was a man named Willie Ray Rector, who came up for the death penalty. And his crimes, and there's a really good book about it, and I can't remember the name of the book, but Mr. Rector was a Razorback. He finished college. He didn't make it to the pros. He went back home there in Arkansas, got involved with an armed robbery, one of the police officers knew who he was, so he went over to his house to arrest him. Well, Mr. Rector wasn't having any of that and shot him and killed him. In the pursuant manhunt, Mr. Rector got shot in the head, and it didn't kill him, but it pretty much lobotomized him. And Mr. Rector was sentenced to death. He had a mentality of a 5-year-old, finished college, had a college education, get shot by the cops, had the mentality of a 5-year-old, and didn't understand what was going on. And Governor Clinton at the time went to his execution, and he believed that, he goes, well, he committed the crime. And there was a whole big argument or debate about it because President Clinton would not excuse or commute this execution. And the story, as the story goes, Mr. Rector was brought for his last meal. He wanted a Big Mac and fries, a strawberry shake, and an apple pie. They got him his last meal request. After he finished eating, he took his apple pie and gave it to the correctional officer and said, "Sir, can you hold this for me for a little bit? I'm about to have to go get a lethal injection, and I would like to eat my apple pie when I came back." So he had absolutely no idea what was going on. But because of the leniency of Dukakis and other Democrat governors, we've got it tough on crime to where we do not show leniency. We do not show forgiveness or mercy. And we follow through with the sentences that have been handed down. The war on drugs. The war on drugs started in the 1970s. You've got a lot of people that are in prison. And one of the things that I've noticed is that, I've got people in my prison. I've got this one guy in my prison. He was convicted for performing oral sex on a 6-year-old girl, and he received a sentence of 20 years, which is okay, I guess. But I have a drug dealer who was busted in the Highlands for dealing cocaine, and he was given a minimum 50-year. His short way is 50 years in prison. So because of this war on drugs, a lot of sentences against drug trafficking and drug possession have gotten worse than some of these heinous crimes that we're seeing. Parole authorities' reluctance to release people from prison, and we've seen that a lot because We're afraid that if we release them, they're going to go back to their criminality. Nationally, we have a 66% recidivism rate across the country. Texas is bragging a 16% recidivism rate and has been dropped over the last several years because I'm wanting to say because of the chaplaincy. And then there's a growth dynamic created by the corrections boom. Juries are sending a lot more people to prison. A lot more people are pleading guilty. And if you're pleading guilty, you're going to prison. John Langford is wholly against that. Okay. So criminal laws and criminal justice institutions, policies, and practices are intended to achieve justice in the present without compromising the ability of future generations. So what we want, or what we're focusing on in corrections, is the idea to create a better future. And if you're wanting to create a better future, you want to be part of a better future, you really do want to be in corrections, because in corrections, you are giving people the opportunity to change their mindset, to change their heart, to become productive members of society. Okay, so some of the careers that you can find within corrections is teaching. Texas, it's the Wyndham School District. It was established in 1969 by George Beto. Activity therapy. This is games like my prison I work at had a cornhole competition this weekend. Business manager, case managers, chaplain, which I am, chemical dependency managers, substance abuse counselors, children's services counselors, victim services counselors, drug court coordinators, field administrators, fugitive apprehension officers, human services counselors, job placement officers, mental health, parole caseworkers, parole officers, pre-sentence investigators, probation officers, program specialists. There's a whole list here. They're on the screen. I shouldn't have to read them all to you. Crime and corrections. Let's get into some of the definitions. A felony is a serious criminal offense punishable by more than 2 years. I know the screen says more than 1 year, and I know Kansas has up to a level 9 felony, a 9th degree felony, which is a year in jail. I like Texas's policy. Texas has a state jail, which is 2 years, a 3rd degree felony, 2nd degree felony, 1st degree felony, capital felony. Misdemeanors, there's 3 levels, a category C, B, and A. Category C is punishable by fine only. B and C are punishable by a year to 18 months in jail. Okay. An infraction is a violation of the state statute or local ordinances, punishable by a fine or other penalty, or specified by a short term of incarceration. Okay, so our sources of data is the Uniform Crime Report, and then the Bureau of Statistics National Crime Victimization Survey. I know we're in the process of changing the Uniform Crime Report to incident-based crime report, where we register and we track every instance. The Uniform Crime Report only tags or only responds to the most significant case. It only reports or tracks the most significant case in any particular crime. The incident-based is going to categorize all of the crimes, and they're going to track all of the crimes in any specific spree. So, like a murder, I go into a convenience store, I use a gun, I rob the store, I murder the clerk, I get in my car, I run off, I evade arrest, I go on a high-speed chase. Okay, so under the UCR, the only thing that would be measured is the murder. Under the incident-based, they would have the illegal gun, possession of an illegal firearm, brandishing a firearm, armed robbery, murder, evading arrest, speeding, all of the crimes that were motor vehicle crimes that were committed, they're all going to be calculated and classified as we go through and we watch the as we track the crime. The Bureau of Justice Statistics, their National Crime Victimization Survey, goes into the households and asks them about the crime that they committed, both crimes that were reported and not reported. And this is how we get the dark figure of crime. Correctional clients are individuals who are assigned to alternative sentencing programs and those held in jails. So here's the funnel, and I've already discussed the funnel. I've already talked about the funnel, so I'm not going to discuss it again. But just to reiterate, out of 1,000 crimes, only 24 are going to go to prison. So if I have 94,000 inmates in the Texas prison system, how many crimes did Texas miss? Okay. The criminal justice system is a process of achieving justice through the application of criminal law. This system is a collection of agencies, and the client is the offender. And so entering the correctional system, first the crime has to be reported by law enforcement. Law enforcement has to investigate the crime. They have to make an arrest. They have to send it to prosecution. Once it's sent to prosecution, the information is presented to the prosecutor. He will either decide no charges filed, the accused is arrested, a nolo prosequi, where the prosecutor drops the charges after filing them, or he files charges and he sets to grand jury for an arraignment for a true bill, so charges can be filed. Part of the pretrial release, there's a pretrial release decision made by the judge on whether or not you're going to get bail, whether or not that bail is going to be on your cognizance, if you're going to have an ankle monitor, if you're going to have pretrial supervisors, probation officers keeping track of you. If there's no probable cause to be found, cases are dismissed. Probable cause for such a belief, it's going to be handed over to grand jury. Adjudication is a process where they arrive at the final decision, and that's going to be the last thing that happens. Arraignment is where you're having an appearance to court as part of the criminal procedure. A nolo contendere, which is a plea of no contest. This is where the bad guy or the suspect says, I'm not going to admit that I'm guilty, but I'm not going to contest you. So some of the sentencing options that are available throughout the country, 38 states and the federal government have the death penalty. You can be sentenced to restitution, where you have to fix everything. Probation for a number of years. In the state of Texas, you cannot be on probation for more than 10 years. Community service and fines. Incarceration in prison or jail or another confinement facility, residential treatment facility, such a things. A lot of states' mandatory minimum sentencing laws require that a person convicted of certain offenses must serve a minimum prison term. The judge must impose the prison term, which may not be reduced by parole board or by good time. Exhaustion of state remedies, losing all direct appeals. If you want to appeal your conviction, you have to go through the state first. Even still, like I've got an example going on right now. The African American population is wanting to be able to have dreadlocks. The state of Texas does not allow dreadlocks, so they're trying to use a religious exemption to no dreadlocks. And some have claimed Rastafarian, but Rastafarian is not a recognized faith in the state of Texas. So now they're moving to this claim that they're part of the Moorish science. Moorish science is part of the Islamic community, and there is a belief that they should be allowed to have dreadlocks. Well, I've denied every one of them. I've got, I don't know, 20 different requests to be allowed to have dreadlocks, and I've denied them because it's against policy. So they've filed a grievance. Okay, and this grievance comes in, and the step one grievance comes to me, and I put on dreadlocks are a violation of policy. Their dreadlocks are not required for the Moorish science, faith, and Rastafarian is not an authorized, recognized faith within the state of Texas, uh, Department of Criminal Justice. I hereby deny any remedy or relief or to the restriction on dreadlocks. So then that goes to my warden. My warden will sign off on it and he'll approve it because I will attach the policy. He won't have to do any research. He'll just look at my answers. He'll look at the policy. He'll sign off on it, and it goes back to the inmate saying, sorry, you lose. Their next step is to file a step two grievance. The step two grievance is to go to my boss, the regional chaplain. So because I don't work for the warden. I work on his prison, and I have to get permission to do the programs that I want to do while on his prison, but I don't work for him. I work for the regional chaplain. So a step two grievance is going to go to the regional chaplain. Regional chaplain is going to support my findings, and then he's going to send it to the director of the chaplaincy and rehabilitation division, who will also support it. Then the last option, well, it's not the last option, but the next option that a offender has is to write the ombudsman. And he can file a complaint with the ombudsman that I am not letting him have dreadlocks and I am denying his religious freedom. Once the ombudsman say Rastafarian is not authorized, a recognized faith in Texas, you can't have dreadlocks, then all of their state options for relief have been exhausted, and they're available to file a 1983 lawsuit against me. And there'll be a whole lecture on the 1983 lawsuit later in the semester. The subsystems, there's institutional corrections and non-institutional corrections, or community services and community corrections. To revoke probation is a formal termination of their conditional freedom, and their initial prison sentence is reinstated and they're sent to prison. A revocation hearing is part of the due process hearing that determines whether or not conditions of probation have been violated before the probation can be revoked. Okay. That is the end of that lecture. So let me go ahead and close this. And I want to get into the history of corrections as it sits. Corrections, and I know we're getting long, and I warned you that this one's going to be a little long. We're at 40 minutes. I hope to try to not to let these go over 30, but I'm going to do this one quick. So the history of punishment has been part of society since the beginning of society. Since we started communal living, we have automatically always looked to punishment for people violating against us. A lot before it was part of the Wehrgeld or the blood feud. If you came to my place and you hurt one of my people, I'm going to go back. I'm going to hurt one of your people. I'm going to hurt you. Yeah. So these ancient punishments, these of blood feuds, are talked about in the ancient writings. Hammurabi turned around and said, "Hey, we're working together. We're living together. I am going to avenge you. So I want you to give up your claim for a vengeance and give it to the state, and the state will seek this vengeance." And these were documented in Hammurabi's code, in Greek orators and the poets, the philosophers, and Homer in the Odyssey. Punishments and the way that we did things were well documented. And then we find the first, I'm going to call it the first evolution of criminal jurisprudence is found in the ancient Hebrew history, or what we know as the Old Testament of the Bible, where it required witnesses and it gave um, punishments and it gave expectations. It set up the cities of refuge. It set up prisons. Okay. The Roman 12 tablets were published in 451 BC, giving and defining punishment and expectations. Okay. So some of the physical punishments that we saw and we find was flogging or being whipped. Um, Depending on the seriousness of the crime, you could be whipped with what's called a cat of nine tails. And it had 9 knotted cords fastened to a handle. Inside of these knots were sharp rocks, shards, things that would cut and tear apart your skin. The Russian knot, which was fitted with fish hooks. So as it hit your skin, it would hook in your skin and it would rip it off. Branding. We used branding a lot in the United States. Criminals were branded with a mark or a letter on their face signifying their crime. You've heard of the Scarlet Letter. If you've read the Scarlet Letter, where women had to actually sew a letter on their chest. Men got it branded. If you were branded a coward, you had a C branded to both of your cheeks. If you were a liar, you had an L. You know, sometimes it was put on your forehead, identifying the crime. You had a great big humongous L tattooed on your face. You know, everybody would know that you were a liar and they wouldn't believe anything that you said. If you were an adulteress, like the Scarlet Letter was about, you know, you'd have an A on there. You know, if you're a guy looking for somebody on the side, you'd want to look for somebody that had an A branded to them, because you already know that they're willing to fornicate outside of religion, outside of marriage. Mutilation, the lex talionis. Mutilation is about damaging. You know, when I lived in Turkey, if you were a thief, they'd break your hands. They'd take a hammer and they'd smash all of your fingers so that you couldn't steal again. Then there's instant death, capital punishment, instant death, beheading, hanging, garroting. It was frequently reserved for the nobility. Then there was the lingering death, and this includes being burned alive, being broken on the wheel. If you saw the Mel Gibson movie Braveheart, you know, he was broken on the wheel. Some people say that the electrocution is a lingering death because, you know, it doesn't kill you immediately. The lethal injection that we have going on in the state doesn't kill you immediately. There's some court cases running around about how it's torture, not execution, to be executed by lethal injection, where, you know, if you were hung, your neck is broke immediately. Your head is cut off. You die instantly. There's not a whole lot of pain involved. If you're shot, you die, and it's done quickly. The rack, you know, another form of death is torture, where you're placed on the rack, where they break every joint in your body. They use red hot piercers to pull your flesh away. Going back to William Wallace, he had a hook shoved up his anal cavity, and his intestines was ripped out of his body and laid on his stomach. You know, these things they don't kill you right away, and it's quite painful. Then there's the exile and transportation. In 1597, England approved the exile. Well, France exiled. All throughout history, we exiled people, but English common law, 1597 authorized the transport of criminals from England to penal colonies. One such penal colony was the state of Georgia, here in the United States, and another one was in Australia, in New South Wales. Public humiliation, where you were put in stocks and pillory. You were put in a sandwich board to humiliate you and embarrass you. And then there was prison. France in the 1700s. Back up. France was transporting prisoners to Madagascar, in New Caledonia, the Marquise Islands, and French Guiana. Devil's Island functioned as a prison until 1951 because they wanted to remove them from the community and from society. Peter Sparrenberg said that bondage or any punishment that puts severe restrictions on a condemned person's freedom of action and movement, including but not limited to imprisonment, is considered as incarceration. Okay, so the House of Correction started in 1500s to the 1700s. This was a workhouse in England. It was the first workhouse was called Bridewell. These first prisoners were put in workhouses to pay off their fines and to work to restore order. Okay, they were pretty much slaves. Okay, they were criminals who were put into a form of servitude, indentured servitude, until they recompensed or had restoration for their crimes. Okay, two main elements fueled the development of prisons as we know them today. The first was a philosophical shift away from punishment, from physical punishment, towards healing the soul, fixing the human spirit, and the passage of laws preventing imprisonment of anyone but criminals, and doing away with the slave trade. So the first prison in America was established by William Penn. Well, he was the founder of Pennsylvania. William Penn was confined in the Tower of London for a crime of promoting faith. While imprisoned, he wrote "No Cross, No Crown." He influenced the Great Act of 1962 because the Pennsylvania Quakers reduced capital offenses to a single crime, which was premeditated murder, and abolished all corporal punishments, and everybody was sent to Walnut Street Jail. John Howard was taken prisoner by pirates on a trip to Portugal. He was appointed the High Sheriff of Bedfordshire, and he began his work arguing for the abolishment of spiked collars and chains and other form of corporal punishments and humiliation. His 1977 book, The State of Prisoners in England and Wales, he described a clean, well-run institutions in which prisoners were kept busy by doing productive work. Okay. Cesar Beccaria, he wrote an essay called On Crimes and Punishment in 1764. He advocated for swift punishment. He said that all punishment must be certain, swift, and proportional. If you get caught committing a crime, you should know that you are going to be punished. That punishment should be swift, it should come quickly, and it should be proportional to the crime that you committed. Jeremy Bentham advocated for utilitarianism principle. The highest objective was of public policy and bringing the greatest happiness for the largest number of people. And this meant exiling or incarcerating, incapacitating those people who were violated the moral code of the culture. He thought that proper punishment could deter crime and gave rise to the hedonistic calculus. And you should have heard about the hedonistic calculus in your intro class, which was a prerequisite for this class. So I'm not going to get into the whole hedonistic calculus that Bentham came up, although it's there. Okay, so George Beto, I mentioned him earlier, but he was the former director of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. He believed in the goal of rehabilitation. He drew special attention to the importance of preparing inmates for release and back into society. George Beto said that every inmate should have two things. He should have a job and he should have a Bible. He believed that every inmate in the state of Texas has a Bible and he has a job. But in order to get a job on the outside, you have to have an education. So in 1969, he established the Windham School District as a way to educate and get people in education so they can get a job on the outside. Recently, they established a chaplaincy and the faith-based initiative programs. I wrote a paper in 2004 about the importance of the faith-based initiatives. I'm wanting to do another project, and I want to do a compare and contrast of between those states that have a faith-based initiative and those that do not have a faith-based initiative, and whether or not the faith-based initiatives make a difference in our jurisprudence and in corrections. Okay, so there is my lecture for the day. Let me close this one. Okay, and then I can stop sharing my class. All right, so here we go. This is showing I went an hour, but I didn't go an hour. I went about 55 minutes. I hope everything is good. And I hope this was a good lecture for you. Make comments in the Lion's Den about this and let me know what's going on. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the recording and I will make it available for everybody. There it is. So I hope you have a great week and I'll see you in the forums.